here with Shane Clark, and we're going to talk about a big issue, especially here in California. It's rent control. So what's up, Shane?
Hi, Kenny. How are you doing?
Oh, good. How's Sacramento doing?
Well, it's heating up in many ways.
That's good, yeah. Not only the temperature, but that crazy that housing market. And it's been so big. I was listening to an audiobook by Gary Vee, and he even spoke about Sacramento and is about a realtor and how it's booming out there. So Shane, what do you do out there in Sacramento?
I'm an apartment broker with TRI Commercial. So basically, I'm like a real estate agent, but I represent buyers and sellers of apartment buildings.
Oh, nice. So, and how's the market doing right now in Sacramento?
Well, right now, it's an extremely tight market, meaning there's not a lot of supply. Mm-hmm. And so that's really driven up prices a lot. And we also have what we call the Bay Area migration from many tenants and just people in general. It's a giant exodus from San Francisco Bay Area, the East Bay, and they're seeking more affordable living conditions, and a lot of people are coming up to Sacramento. But what's affordable relative to San Francisco is still extremely high for Sacramento. So that's really driven up rents. We've led the nation year-on-year rent growth for the last couple of years, and that's one reason why we now have tenant activist groups trying to implement rent control up here in Sacramento.
Mm-hmm. So I guess talk about rent control. What is rent control? So
rent control is when the city passes an ordinance to artificially cap what rent growth can be. Traditionally, how it's applied is once a tenant is established in a rental unit, the city dictates how much each yearly rent increase can be. For example, in Sacramento, they filed a petition with the city that would cap rent growth between 2 to 5% each year. Mm-hmm. And it'd be kind of tied to the consumer price index. So if the consumer price index was 3% next year, the city would allow landlords to increase rents by 3%. But in no case would they allow yearly rent increases of more than 5%. Okay?
So in California, is there other cities looking to do rent control besides Sacramento?
Yes, Sacramento is right now one of the top cities that tenant activist groups are targeting because it is the capital city. But for example, we've had rent control for years in cities like San Francisco, San Jose, and LA. Mm-hmm. And for example, in San Francisco, this had rent control for over 3 decades.
Wait. So San Francisco right now has rent control.
It has had rent control since the late 70s. Mm-hmm. And do you know what the median rent for a one-bedroom apartment is in San Francisco? $3,400 per month for a one-bedroom. That's the median. That's not the high. Mm-hmm. And they've had rent control since the late 70s. Mm-hmm. And so you can be asking yourself, how is that possible? If they have rent control, right, how can the rent be so high? Well, what rent control, it can only control as long as a tenant is in place. Mm-hmm. So and this is why you can have cases in San Francisco where in the same apartment building, you can have one tenant who's been there for 20, 25 years, and they're paying $900 a month. Mm-hmm. And right next door, the neighbor's paying $4,000 a month in rent. Okay. Because that tenant has never left, the property owner since, let's say, 1980s, 1990s, whenever, the property owner has only been able to increase rents a couple percentage points each year. Whereas as soon as that tenant leaves, that property owner can then raise rent to whatever the current fair market rate is. And when I say that, that's whatever a ready, willing, and able tenant is willing to pay for that unit. Now, the issue with rent control is that it leads to shortages, number one. And the reason it leads to shortages is because when property owners, once you have years of rent control, the property owners' insurance payments, their taxes, their utility costs, the cost to make repairs when they have to replace the roof, etc., all those costs keep going up. But if your rents are capped and it's artificially being mandated by the city how much you can increase your rents, all of a sudden that property owner, after several years, is no longer able to generate a profit in that investment. So what a lot of property owners do, they will take their units off the market. They'll convert those apartment units to condominiums. And then they'll sell them individually for sale. And here's a great little statistic. This is from October 2017 Stanford University study on rent control. In this study, it was looking at San Francisco, and they saw that the effects of this 30 plus years of San Francisco rent control led to a citywide rent increase of 7%, and it caused 15% of the existing rental units to be taken off the market. So, and remember, it's supply and demand. When you have lower supply, demand goes up.
Right. Well, we hear, though, from people that want rent control, well, it's not simply about the supply. But what would you say to that? It seems like it is about the supply, because you have a lot of something, or if you have very few of something, then it's going to go up in cost. It's kind of a natural thing to happen.
It's both supply and demand, like all economics.
Correct.
And of course, when you have shortages, it's going to lead to increases. The other problem is we have such a huge demand coming from the Bay Area with all of these Silicon Valley tech companies that have brought in thousands upon thousands of high-paying jobs. That created asymmetry in the market, where these cities, for the past 30 plus years, they have not been able to keep up with the influx of new people coming to live and work in the Bay Area. And the main economic driver has been Silicon Valley. So you have this skyrocketing demand and not enough supply. Now, before we go much further into rent control, let's just first talk about why is there such a shortage. And there's many reasons for this. For example, in the Sacramento area, do you know how much it is for a multifamily developer to construct a new apartment building? And of course, you're going to have the cost for the labor and the materials to construct the new building. But before they even purchase the land, just going through all of the entitlements, the permits, the environmental phase 1, phase 2, all of those levels of bureaucratic permits and fees. Do you know how much these developers are into the project?
Well, it's California, so it's probably, I'm guessing it's a lot, but I'm not sure how much it would be.
$50,000 per unit.
Just per unit.
Before you even break it down. Okay? In Sacramento, just a few years ago in 2013, that was about the median price per unit that apartments were selling for.
Right. And now that's just the fees.
Construct.
Wow.
That's just the fees.
Now, so do you have the numbers as far as the fees compared to, like, let's say the 70s to 2000s? how high have fees gone up?
That's a great question, and I'd have to look up the exact amount. I can tell you it's gone up a lot. The exact number, I'd have to look that up for, but it has gone up substantially.
It seems like there's a lot of factors in. So you have the cost put on by the government, maybe a little bit of you shared an opinion page, and maybe a little bit of NIMBYism going on. Not in my backyard as far as building certain projects, and so you have those two things. So what other factors are playing, and also too, I guess, the influx of people going into the Bay Area and into cities. What are other factors that play into housing costs and them skyrocketing?
One of the number one things in the last few years is cost of labor. Labor costs, it's skyrocketed. And there's multiple reasons for this. One of the most obvious reasons is after the 2008 crash, all of those construction workers, construction just stopped for several years in the downturn. And many of those tradesmen and tradeswomen, they had to retool, and they ended up getting jobs in other career fields just to survive. And now the construction is finally starting to come back into play. Many of those people, they've already moved on with their careers, and they didn't come back to the construction field. That's part of it. The other part is for the past 30 plus years, for the most part, our parents had been telling us, you have to go to college.
Right.
That's like a month.
Yep.
You need to go to school, get your education, get a well-paying job. Well, the problem is we have this huge shortage simply because everyone got a college degree and no one started swinging a hammer out of high school.
And I think early 2000s, we're all told to go get a tech degree, go learn code. And no one was talking about trades. No one, going through high school, junior college, and college, I never heard one time, hey, you can go be a plumber, you can be a roofer, you can help build a house and make good money. And everyone, and just because the .com stuff, hey, go learn code, go to Silicon Valley. That's what the hype was. And now we're kind of reaping the benefits of that. It seems like a lot. So it seems like a lot of factors that are there that don't involve, I don't think rent control then would be a solution, because it seems like there's a lot of factors. It's not, and you always hear from rent control folks, and again, I'm kind of like not in the middle, but still learning about this. But from what I see, I don't think it makes a lot of sense, because for one, it just gives government more power to control, to take the free market out of it. And the free market is still I believe it's a good thing still. It's not the perfect solution, but compared to a bunch of bureaucrats setting prices versus, hardworking people developing projects, I'd rather go with this, those business people developing a project, putting their skin on the line to do something. And
you're absolutely right, Kenny. And two things you have to look out for government interference. Here's another reason why we're so short with skilled trades. For example, I have a friend who we both started wiring homes for Habitat for Humanity, and he just loved it. He ended up, he is now working as an electrician, but he was shocked to find out that to get his electrical contractor's license, he has to jump through all of these hoops and go through all of this bureaucratic red tape in the state of California to get his electrical contracting license. Do you know? And there's pretty much, he looked every way. He cannot find a shortcut. Do you know how long it's going to take him to get his license?
What's that?
5 years.
Jeez, that's too
5 years.
And why does it take that long to get a license then?
Because California is the most licensed state in the Union, in the United States of America. For these beauty salons, you need to get a license, and that can take you up to 2 years just to do hair.
And that's true, because I have a friend that their mom wants to get back into being a beautician and get a new license, and it does take a long time. That's what's kind of stopping. And what that's doing is actually stopping, and especially in California, you always hear about women in business, like that's stopping a lot of women from starting a business. and being productive and really going out there and producing for the economy, and we're just stopping that. And I just don't see, and again, I think tying it to, us, we're both Catholics, and we want to see people, have a good life, have, be able to support themselves, their families, and go up the ranks. And it just does not, we need to figure out a better way than stifling good competition as far as the rental market, housing market. So we hear, I guess, some of the negatives of how do we produce a state where people are able to afford a home?
Here's the big thing. We need to streamline development. We need to streamline development by increasing labor workforce and removing these barriers to allow people to become an electrical contractor, a drywall contractor, a plumbing contractor. So then we can, again, it's supply and demand. Once we have more people, we resolve this labor shortage and we encourage more people to go through trade schools. Not everybody is meant to go to college. Not everybody is. And not everybody wants to sit through 4 years of college. There's many people who love to work with their hands. My friend, for example, he said the worst thing, like his parents were well-intentioned, but he goes, he has never been happier in his life than now, working with his hands, wiring houses. And had he started out high school, he would actually be making more money. Wow. Electrical contractors are extremely well paid. And he would have been happy following his passion and would be helping relieve this housing crisis. The other thing is streamlining, as we said, all of these entitlements and environmental impact studies. I mean, we need to protect the environment. Yes, we do. But we can't seek what the California Environmental Quality Act. That CEQA, it has killed so many development projects.
Now, what I don't understand is why does an environmental impact study have to be done every time? Because we already know, we have the data, what cars produce. We have the data when you put cement or asphalt on certain types of soil. We have the data for everything. So why do we continually need to redo a study each time there's a development? I don't. Why does the state want us to do that?
Again, it's overregulation, and it's also a tool used by both opponents of development and the NIMBYs. Those who don't want the development in their backyard, they'll hire some big shot attorney to then file a lawsuit, whether it's frivolous or actually legitimate, based on CEQA, to either delay or completely kill the project. And this also causes prices to skyrocket for the developer, and then your rent goes up because of it.
And what about too? Because I think there is a balance too between like just suburban sprawl like we see in LA. Like I don't think we want to continue to do that versus having proper development. How do we balance that? Having good development practices within cities versus just kind of outward suburban sprawl. Can we have both?
I'm a member of the Urban Land Institute, and the two big focuses right now on future urban planning is what we're seeing with urban core development, adaptive reuse, where you take abandoned industrial warehouses and converting them into loft-type projects and residential mixed use and creating that higher density component. However, the vast majority of people still live in suburban areas. And look, I think Texas is probably the best example, the Woodlands, master plan communities, where you have suburban areas with urban amenities, where you are planning these entire developments with a job center within this community. Cut down on commute times, it's better for the environment, less driving, less fossil fuel emissions, and it's creating, you can have a little bit higher density than the normal urban sprawl. You have less commuting. Master plan communities, I think, is going to be a big part of the future and something that will really help a lot of these issues.
Yeah, because I think we can have both.
Now,
I think we can have development plus, smart communities. And it seems like a lot of times there's a battle between the developer and people who want to, have smart growth. And I think you can marry the two. I don't think they're really opposing to each other. I'm all for, and I love seeing what's going on in Sacramento, the redevelopment of downtown. But it's come at a cost. It's coming to where a lot of people, blue collar folks now can't afford to live downtown. And it's just
right.
A place where you can walk to the grocery store, you can walk to the market, things like that. So I guess one more thing too, we've heard kind of more the negatives about rent control. What would be like an argument someone would have for rent control?
Here's the thing. Rent control will benefit a tenant at that moment in time. For example, if you're living in Sacramento and you're in an apartment with relatively low rent and they implement rent control, while you're there in that living there, it will benefit you for some time, because then you can have more stability. You don't have to worry about the rent possibly going up 10-20% next year, and you can plan on staying there for longer. However, I'm going to give you a little case study, and this will kind of explain why in the long term San Francisco has $3,500 median one-bedroom rent, and why rent control is not a good thing overall in the course of time. As an apartment broker, I deal with both small investors and I talk with institutional investors as well. And I was talking with one acquisition manager in this big institutional investment firm, and they're currently targeting Portland because Portland has implemented rent control. And what happens is that after a few years of rent control, these property owners, they're no longer able to keep up on deferred maintenance when they need to replace the roof or some big, have to redo the plumbing, electrical systems, big things like that. When their rents are capped, they get to a point where it becomes very distressed. Instead of replacing the roof, they just let it go. And these properties fall into disrepair. And they can't. And here's the other problem with rent control. Just cause eviction rules. Just cause is saying, hey, now it has good intentions. They're trying to say, hey, a landlord can't just evict you because they don't like you,
right?
Or because for any given reason.
And that seems the argument too. I think, to be honest, a lot of the folks for rent control, they're saying it's pretty much the greedy landlords. But I think, again, to go into business, you can't, scare away your customer. That's just common business practice. So I think there are some greedy people, of course, but I think the majority of people in business, that's not the case.
Yeah, and it just depends, like you said. And for the most part, a lot of the smaller owners, they have relationships with their tenants. They have long-term tenants with rents far below market rate. But what can happen is, especially in cities like Sacramento and these urban centers where you do see these large areas of rent growth, a lot of institutional investors will come in and then they'll buy out the smaller owners, and then all of a sudden they will do all the updates and increase rents by $200-$300 a month. And that pushed a lot of good tenants out, and they truly are just kind of in it for the money and the profit. And so that's where you can there is some validity to that, but at the same time, that's their business model. And again, as a tenant, that is a risk you have of being a tenant. But again, these are arguments that on the rent control side they will make. But here's the short-sightedness of it. For example, that friend I have who works for an institutional company, he said what they do, and he says it's sad. He hates that this happens, but it's the reality of the situation. So with just cause eviction rules, your leases don't matter anymore. So once a lease is up after a year, a landlord can't just give a tenant 60 days notice. As long as that tenant keeps paying their low rent controlled rent and they don't break the terms of their original lease, the property owner, the landlord, cannot get rid of them unless they pay what's known as a tenant relocation benefit. So even this tenant could have been there for 5-10 years, and let's say this property owner, they can no longer maintain their building. It's falling apart, but they don't have the money, cash flow, to maintain their building and their investment. But there's nothing they can do, because the only way to get those tenants out so they can make the improvements to then increase rents to salvage their investment, they would have to pay their tenants a tenant relocation benefit, which can vary from $8,000 all the way up to $40,000 in some Bay Area cities. Okay, so each tenant, you could potentially be paying tens of thousands of dollars just so you can get them out, make the improvements, and bring rents up to market rate. So then you can make all the improvements on the building you need.
And thus, shrinking the availability of affordable housing.
Yeah, absolutely. So then what these institutional investors do, they will come in and they will target these small mom and pop property owners who have worked their whole life. This is, for many of them, this is their retirement, these apartment buildings. And now, with their building falling into disrepair and they're distressed, they're now bleeding money because they cannot keep up with all of their operating costs. These institutional buyers can now buy these buildings at a discount.
Wow.
They buy the building at a discount. Mom and pop apartment owner loses their retirement. Then these institutional investors, they have already worked into their pro forma, their financial analysis, the tenant relocation benefits. They pay the tens of thousands of dollars to each tenant household, and then they leave. Then the institutional investor makes all the improvements, and then they charge the $3,500, $4,000 a month rents. And after that, now they bought it at a low price from mom and pop. They made the improvements, and even with those $10,000 payouts to the tenants, with all the improvements, now the $3,500 a month rents, it's a super valuable property. They can resell it for a profit.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, mom and pop investors lose their retirement. The tenants, for a short period of time, those tenants who have the low rent controlled rent, it benefited them and they got a payout. So for those tenants, for a period of time, it was a good deal. But now that they're out on the street, they're dealing with these shortages and these increased rents. Now they have to pay $3,500 rents to stay in San Francisco.
Wow.
So in the long term, it does not help the tenants. In the long term, it does not help mom and pop owner. The big institutional investor who played it right, they make money. And the government bureaucracy, because by the way, this whole time you have rent control, they form powerful rent control boards to regulate all of the landlords. They charge each landlord, like for example in the city of Richmond, $98 per unit. That's another cost on top of these landlords.
Why is that? So what is that cost going towards?
To fund the newly formed rent control board, basically the city bureaucrats, who are now the board, and it's regulators.
So the fact is, if this stuff actually worked, and we would see results. You have a good tree, you have good fruits, and so to be honest, look at the Bay Area; it has pretty bad fruits for the poor. We keep hearing, from these people, these are policies that help the poor, help the middle class, and what we see in the Bay Area is quite the opposite. And those are just the facts. I think we can all agree on that. I mean, I don't see, and so I don't see how, just a layman, just still learning about this issue. Like, I'm just looking at what's going on in these, very, it's not a political show, but very progressive cities. The poor people can't afford it. They're not welcome there because of the situation. So again, how do we move forward as a state besides, increasing labor? What are actually some temporary solutions we could do, like in Sacramento, so people can afford, let's say I just rent an apartment in a decent area.
Again, I think streamlining the development process, having more subsidized components to these new developments, which I think could be more possible if we did alleviate a lot of the costs on these.
And what do you mean subsidized? Like who's subsidizing the cost?
Subsidized. So what that means is when a developer builds a subsidized, affordable rate apartment, they are able to obtain tax credits and different benefits from the city or whatever local government agency. And it uses basically taxpayer money to then subsidize. So instead of paying market rate, this is how if you're making below whatever they consider the poverty level.
So there is room then for some government involvement on a small level to help in the, I mean, because I'm not, if it works, it works. I'm not against government or for government. I just want to do things that work. And it seems like, like a minor subsidy, it might work. It's more of a benefit than, let's say, harm towards private business. I mean, to me, I'd rather, if that supports it, I think that's a better idea.
It's not the end all be all, because we've had these policies for a long time. But again, you can only pour so much taxpayer money into this as well. I think a good example too is in Stockton, especially downtown. I mean, I think there has to be, private investors willing to invest in the area. If not, so I think there has to be that both, willingness. I mean, it's not even a willingness. I think it's just a good market where people can go in there. Because from what I've heard, people want to invest in Stockton, but again, the bureaucracy kind of gets in the way of that. And that's why people are not investing there. Anything else we can add to that, about conversation and rent control? Yeah, and one last, we have a developer in Sacramento who really understands this situation, really wants to help. And they're developing the first micro unit project in downtown Sacramento, where you have studio units ranging in size from about 300 square feet to 400 square feet. Very small units. However, they're going to be relatively affordable. They're trying to keep the rents at or below $1,000 a month. And because that's the problem, with most of this new development, the only thing that pencils out is the high market rate. Because otherwise, those $50,000 before you even break ground, the cost of labor, materials, everything else. At the end of the day, the only thing that's profitable to build is the high market rate stuff with maybe a small subsidized component. So doing these micro unit type projects where you could create hundreds of more units at $1,000 a. And again, it's not for everybody. You'd have to really downsize.
I think it could work, especially for younger kids going to college and they want to live in an urban area. I think that could really be beneficial to them, and it gives an opportunity maybe to own something or just have cheaper rent.
Absolutely.
It uses a lower rung of the ladder to kind of move up as they get older.
Exactly. And it's sad because we don't have time to get into it tonight, but another thing to look out is at the state level is the Costa-Hawkins Act. And it does many things, but one of the most important things, this Costa-Hawkins Act, it prevents local cities who implement rent control from imposing rent control on new construction built after 1995. And it appears that they have just achieved enough signatures to put the repeal of Costa-Hawkins on the 2018 November ballot at state level. If that gets repealed, and then, for example, Sacramento imposes local rent control, and in theory, they could have the ability to then impose rent control on new development. That developer I just told you about, who's doing the micro unit project in Sacramento, they publicly stated at the Urban Land Institute meeting that if that happens, they would pull the plug on that project. And they've already gone.
That's too bad. And again, this is a project that, in being very innovative and looking to bring in low-cost housing in. another example of that.
And there, I mean, this would really put a freeze if cities are allowed to put rent control on new development. Many of the projects in the development pipeline, they would stop. They would, and that we need that. There's no denying we need more housing.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of a big topic. We can talk all day about rent control housing. Because it affects me too. I mean, because I'm lucky. I live in Orange County, and I'm lucky I have a live-work place, at my job, and I really don't pay any rent. So I'm really fortunate to where I'm at. But just down the street from me is the big river near Angel Stadium. And a few months ago, it was lined up with just homeless people there, and it's pretty scary because a lot of people, I don't know what the percentages are. I mean, I'm probably just 1 or 2 paychecks away from going homeless, and it's especially in California, it's a big topic, and especially with homelessness on the rise here. And again, going back to our Catholic faith, it's up to we want to see people living healthy, successful lives. And especially when they're raising families and things like that, and something, it's not about, government, no government, left, right, but it's about doing the right thing and what works in this state. And I think, I think these conversations need to be had, what the truth is, and how do we get, and at the end of the day, it's about getting people into homes, whether renting or buying a home. And I think it'd be better for the whole state if people bought a home, but if not, at least being able to afford a clean, safe apartment or house to rent. I think having these conversations will at least lead to the truth being out there, and hopefully it gets up to our political folks, the business folks, to kind of come together and think of some good solutions, and especially on the local level. I think that's where you'll find your biggest change, is folks coming on the local level and working together on that. And go ahead.
Yeah, I agree. And here's another thing just to kind of keep in mind and put things in perspective. I do not own any real estate in California, but I do invest out of state. And I have a small 6-unit apartment building in Springfield, Missouri. And I have a 900 square foot, 1-bedroom apartment that I've remodeled. And and I have not been able, it's been on the market for 45 days now, and I still have not been able to find a renter because they can still find cheaper rent.
Where's this at again?
You know what I'm asking for? Springfield, Missouri.
Uh-huh. How much?
Do you know what I'm asking for rent?
Wow, how much?
$550.
Oh, jeez. That's a...
For a remodeled 900 square foot.
900 square feet,
And you're going to see that more people are starting to leave the state, and actually that's going to help relieve some of the demand as well. And it's also going to spur, I think, more politicians into action, because they don't want to see more and more people leaving and hurting. They want to keep California as economically and strong and socially strong, and this housing crisis is really putting California in a horrible position.
Wow. And I know you mentioned, I think it was you the other day, a few weeks ago, about a new Democratic hopeful governor. He was all about nuclear power, not only nuclear power, but bringing housing back to California and having an attitude of abundance. What was his name again?
I think that was someone else, or you might have been telling me that.
Yeah,
I can't remember.
And it's funny because I forgot his name, but because for so long, especially the environmentalists, I always have an attitude of, scarcity. But I think what it is we need to reverse that, have an attitude of abundance, and not an attitude of we can do whatever we want with the land and not respect it. But in a sense, respect the land, but at the same time, it's a pretty hardy planet, and I think we can, work with the planet. It still has a lot to give, and I think this, even just changing the attitude of let's have an abundance and bringing more people here, and having a better attitude about quality of life here. And it seems like it's all about scarcity. It's all about doom and gloom. The whole climate's going to fall apart, which is, we're still here. We're still alive. It's not going anywhere. And I think just that attitude change too. And, I think would help a lot too.
Well, we have policies that protect the environment, that don't put people out on the street.
Right.
We have to keep our property straight.
Yeah. So, but I appreciate it. Again, we can, go on forever. I mean, actually, we got on longer than I thought we would, but which is great, because it's an important topic. But I appreciate it, Shane. Take care.
You bet, Kenny.
All right.
Yeah, thanks for having me.